Principal Architect and Technology Advisor at FutureUs. I'm going to talk about using Google Cloud AI and machine learning APIs with news media websites. Let me start by making a quick overview about Google Cloud. So when I talk about Google Cloud, I'm talking about Google Cloud Platform, which is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service type of cloud provider. And GCP has a strong focus on innovation and in providing services that you cannot reasonably build by yourself. A lot of the services were designed to be global by default, and that's a really competitive advantage comparing with Amazon or with Azure. Some of the services that they provide, they either released it as an open source like Kubernetes, or others they only commercialize. So things like BigQuery. And they have very interesting AI machine learning offering and capabilities. And on that note, they provide things like AI machine learning APIs, and those are fully serverless, pre-trained models that you can leverage without actually having any expertise about AI or machine learning. And examples of that are, for instance, Google Dialogflow, Vision API, speech to text, text to speech, natural language translation, things like that they have been actually doing it for many years, and then now they just fully allow you to use it at the distance of an API call. Other competitors also have it. For instance, both AWS and Azure also have those type of capabilities, but clearly there's a distinction on the features that Google Cloud provides. They are a lot more rich, and they target a lot of functionalities that the others don't. For instance, language support, while others are mostly centered in English, Google Cloud has been widening the range of languages that you can use. And I think that is really what makes this so interesting. Now, if you recall the topic of this talk, it was about how can you do that, how can you leverage these APIs with fake news or credible media. And when we think about fake news and credible media, this has been discussed in the past years multiple times in the society. Things like public elections and geopolitical influences, monetization, clickbait are terms that are related with this. And this really took the world by storm. It was at the center stage of the 2016 United States presidential elections, and moreover has been, with the growing role of the social media in the world, it has been at the center stage of the debate. And it is actually, just to distinguish both, when we talk about credible media, we are talking about newspaper online that is with journalists that are accredited, meaning that they are recognized as journalists, that they are and when you're talking about fake news, we're talking about websites that are run by unknown third parties. They are usually spreading rumors, and they are appealing to the clickbait. And the clickbait is actually one of the reasons why it's so appealing, these websites, because the financial gain is one of the aspects that is driven the rise of these websites. Now, when we talk about extracting metadata from a website, there is it's not new. There's actually a couple of different methods to do so, and I used three of them as a baseline. I used one which will basically take a screenshot of a website, and to do that I'm using XVFB run with HTML to image combined, and that results in this type of screenshots that you can see in the left side. Then I am also extracting text from, also only the text from that website. And you can do that too with, for instance, links. And then I am retrieving all the images that are related to that website. So using something like Image Scraper, you can just collect all the images and download them to your machine, and that results in actually in dozens of those images, as you can see on the right side. Now, taking this is very simple, single commands that you can find in any Linux machine. Now, when you combine that with the Google Cloud machine learning APIs, then it gets really interesting. So these APIs, they are quite easy to use, and just two examples of what you can get from that. So for instance, when you take this screenshot and you combine that with the Google Vision API, and you get things like safe search annotations. So how likely is this to be an adult website, or a racy, or spoof, or violence? So you get this type of text that will allow you to classify a bit that image. It doesn't actually know that it's a website, just know that it's an image. So it classifies based on what it sees. So the Vision API is actually quite rich. Safe search is only one of those capabilities that you can see on the left side. There's also extracting text, so type of OCR type of enrichment, or extracting labels or any kind of web entities that are associated with that image. And then on the text, from pure text, you can use the natural language API and analyze the sentiment, or analyze that, or try to classify what is that text about. And you can actually see like that, for instance, for this text in particular, using this API, we can classify this as news with a confidence of 62%, which is actually quite okay. So I applied this to a wide range of websites. I selected 10 credible websites from both US and UK. I wanted with English language, and I selected 10 random fake news websites from, well, actually you don't know where they are running, but they are all in English. And those sources were, for the fake news websites, they were listed in research articles, so I invite you to read a research paper if you want to know which ones are those. But this generated really interesting findings. So I did this every day for 4 days in a row, and collect all of this information. And interesting findings that I got were analyzing the text, making the text analysis. So you can actually see on the top side, fake versus credible. So this is just using the text. What are the categories with the confidence level of 60% and more? And you can actually see that, interesting enough, on the fake news, there is one category called sensitive subjects that doesn't exist on the credible. And on the credible, you can actually see that around like 75% were classified as news or news politics, which is actually expected from a credible source. So actually that was really good. And the politics tag, so in this particular week, Brexit has been dominating the headlines, so this is actually makes a lot of sense. Now also from the child labels, so the child labels are labels associated with the images that we extracted from the website. So on the top we are checking the text, and here we are taking all the images from those websites and running through this Vision API and getting the labels. And I think the only really interesting thing, so we have also this fake versus credible, but the only interesting thing was actually on the credible, one of those categories is white collar worker. And actually that doesn't happen on the fake. So in the fake ones, nothing associated with race. A lot of parts of of the head, so head, smile, nose, forehead, face, so a lot of I guess people in those images. So that is actually quite interesting that only the credible ones you have like white collar worker or business person, and you don't really have that on the fake. Now, something also very interesting is analyzing the text uh, of the news, analyzing the sentiment of that text, and here I'll two things. There's two values that you get from the Google Cloud API on that. One is the score, and the other is the magnitude of that score. So the score ranges from -1 to 1, and it basically it tells you what, if it's a negative or a positive, in the sense of, for instance, negative things are like violence or something that is sad. So it expresses a bit of emotion because it's a sentiment API. And on positive, it can range from a very happy content or overall positive. Then on the magnitude of that, so it's the strength of the emotion, either positive or negative. And by strength, it ranges from 0 to actually infinite. If you want to learn a bit more about those scales, you can actually read a bit more in the research paper. But interesting enough, one of the things so we also have the same thing, that fake versus credible. And interesting enough is that on the fake, everything is mostly distributed between a very negative type of sentiments. That's the sentiment, overall sentiment of the text. So everything is basically 0 and below. There's not much positive things. And on the credible, the interesting thing that I found was that most of the texts were they were either neutral or negative, but mostly it's been around 0, and 0 is actually it's completely neutral. There was nothing really positive in terms of sentiment of the text, but I would kind of actually expect that the credible news from these accredited sources will be around 0, that they will be a bit neutral. So I think this is actually quite interesting that it found like this compared with that. But if we go just for minimum and maximum in terms of, for instance, of magnitude, or even in terms of score, we can say that in the fake we go from -0.5 to 0.4, so it ranges quite a lot. While on the credible, it goes from -0.4 as minimum and 0 as maximum. So keeping it very neutral actually on the credible. Then something really interesting that you get is from this safe annotations that I actually show a bit earlier. And something really interesting is, and I'm highlighting here, well, on the credible sources about racy, even though mostly it's very unlikely, there's a small minority that will classify as likely or possible, which is a bit maybe not expected from a credible source. And then from the fake news, you get a very likely and still likely and possible. So clearly the fake news screenshots indicate quite a bit more racy, but in general you still find that in the credible sources. And then on the medical, very unlikely to unlikely in credible, but then on the fake news we have a very likely things related with medical, and spoof. And actually this is when I was most curious. So you can actually see that while the credible news still get one likely or possible, very minor though, the fake ones do get likely, possible, and very likely, but they're still less than 50%. So it still passes by real news in a way. It's not a spoof. And then violence, credible sources, everything very unlikely. But on the fake, we do have very likely and likely. So those are in short, were the most interesting findings. So you can actually distinguish very well between fake news and credible news websites by just using this simple API calls. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can actually read the paper, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions and you want to discuss further. Thank you.